polyfluoroalkyl substances that are used in different paper products and even in the almighty Teflon pans. Now this stuff is in your body.
The premier source of patient-centered information on PKD and how to reverse it. This is Felix Mueller.
Hello everybody, this is Felix, your friendly neighborhood kidney hacker, coming back again for episode number 10. Today on butter. This is a topic that is important to us all because many of us are consuming butter in pretty high amounts, maybe in bulletproof coffee, maybe using it to fry your foods. And there has been an article that I've been sent recently, and it was published by none other than Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now the question is, should you be getting your health advice from Arnold Schwarzenegger? I think the last couple of years have made that very clear, that maybe we should be looking somewhere else. But nonetheless, he has made an interesting discovery in that he shed some light on this issue because he pointed to this study. Now, what did this study say? It was a study that compared two groups. One group consuming low-fat yogurt with some butter added, and one study group consuming normal fat yogurt, with the goal being that the fat content matches between both groups. And basically, they just use that to compare the outcomes in cholesterol levels and specifically in apolipoprotein B. You're probably familiar with LDL and HDL. So you can see these as sort of the total content of LDL and HDL in your bloodstream. Apolipoprotein B, or APO-B for short, you can think of as being the individual particles. So if there's a highway and there's several cars that are LDL and several cars that are LDL, APO-B is the chassis of these individual cars. So every car can be different sizes, and that would increase or decrease the amount of LDL in your bloodstream, but they all are just one car. So one particle, for example, of LDL counts 1 towards the APO-B measurement. So Arnold sent out this newsletter to his followers saying butter increases LDL cholesterol more than all other solid fats and oil. So this study showed that the people that were consuming the same amount of fat from butter instead of from full-fat yogurt had higher APO-B levels. So something made their cholesterol carrying protein go up, which is interesting, right? Because we would expect that they would be the same, right? It's the same amount of fat, same type of fat. It's actually the same source of fat because both are from milk, right? But for some reason, the butter fat is worse than the yogurt fat. So why is that? Well, Arnold summarized it in his article. He says, researchers believe it's because the process of making butter destroys the milk fat globule membrane, or MFGM. This membrane, which is well maintained when making cheese and yogurt, structures the fatty acids in dairy in a way believed to aid in absorption and metabolism. So they think basically making butter destroys the milk fat globule membrane. So we remember that making butter is nothing new, right? It's not a new processed food. It's an ancient food. It's something that we've eaten for hundreds and thousands of years. So does this pass the smell test? Do you think it passes the smell test? Could there be another reason that APO-B goes up in the group that has the butter versus the group that doesn't? Well, for that, we have to look towards a pretty recent discovery that was made with butter suppliers. Interestingly enough, in the middle of 2023, in Germany, where I'm from, and also in the US, there were some tests done on the wrappers that the butter comes packaged in. And all these tests found the same thing. For some reason, these wrappers are drenched in PFAs, or PFOAs, right? That is short for polyfluoroalkyl substances that are used in different paper products, but also in makeup, drinking water, dental floss, and even in the almighty Teflon pans. So you might be aware that we're recommending no Teflon pans be used. So now this stuff is in your butter? Well, yeah, it looks like it. So there are all these wrappers that are contaminated with this kind of non-stick coating, even though butter is pretty non-stick by itself. So why would these PFAs lead to higher levels of APO-B in the blood? If it's not the disruption of the fat membrane, then what is it? If it's the PFAs, how could that be? So there are several potential mechanisms of how they could cause an increase in APO-B, but one of the very simple explanations would be they increase inflammation, right? So higher inflammation, body needs to go and repair more damage, which now increases cholesterol. However, if your intake of PFAs is going to be constant, then you're also going to have constant inflammation, which is then an actual risk for cardiovascular disease. The same, of course, goes for rapeseed oil, sunflower oil, all the sources of linoleic acid, which we talked about in another podcast. These also chronically elevate your inflammation, raising your risk for cardiovascular disease. Another potential mechanism by which the PFAs are impacting these cholesterol levels and the ApoB is that they might be impairing the receptors for LDL on the liver cells, therefore increasing circulating LDL, which also increases circulating ApoB, because they're not the same thing, but ApoB describes the particle number. So what can we do about that, right? Well, I'm from Germany, and as it happens, there's only one brand in Germany that does not use these kinds of coated aluminum foil that is very prone to have this PFA coating. But they're not grass-fed, so they don't offer grass-fed butter. That's why I opted to order my butter from Austria, because they sell it packaged in parchment paper, and it's also grass-fed. So it's the best of both worlds. In the US, however, you are way more lucky than I am. There's this website called Mamavation, and they have tested many different butters, and they have shared the results. And Kerrygold came back at 122 ppm organic fluorine. That's for the salted one. The unsalted one came back at half that, at 61 ppm organic fluorine. Then there's the one in paper, much better, at 11 ppm. However, there's a lot of brands that came back at 0. So you should probably be looking into those. There are actually a couple of brands that have tested for low levels of PFAs, and I will put those in the description. So there are some options for you that seem to omit this very, very pernicious issue. So I think it's very much worth your time to invest in a different brand than you're probably doing right now based upon this, because PFAs are no joke. And you really do want to avoid them. You want to avoid them in your Teflon pan. So if you still have one of those, throw them out, please. And you also want to avoid it in your butter. You want to avoid it basically everywhere. There's even toilet paper that's contaminated with this stuff, but that's for another video. Also, don't be fooled by new legislation claiming to limit the amount of PFAs that are allowable in foods, because in California, for example, a new regulation requires there to be lower than 100 ppm of organic fluorine. This is already pretty high, considering that we really want to have a level of 0, but even these regulations are not being enforced. And as you've probably learned through all of these episodes, it is better to do your own research and to find out which products are the safest on your own, rather than relying on regulatory bodies, because this is the state of affairs that we're in right now. One more tip that I can give you, there's a very cheap way that you can replace a lot of your butter if you are up for a little more work. I opted to ask my butcher to give me a couple of pounds of his trimming fat. So whenever they slaughter a cow, there's a lot of fat that they usually throw away. So I get about 5 kilograms of that, and I put it into a slow cooker. Put it outside for 24 hours on the low setting. And then after 24 hours, I go out and strain whatever's left of that. And that's basically the easiest way to make your own tallow, which can replace most of your butter needs when you're looking at cooking. It's amazing stuff. And it's basically free if you're going about it the right way. So that is the way that I reduced my butter consumption quite a bit while keeping saturated fat high and keeping my health in good shape. I hope this helped you guys. I hope you can make some meaningful changes after this. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and leave a subscription. Until the next episode, happy healing.